Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third day of imaginAviation. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Peter Cohen. I want to thank Jim for the great description and real exciting presentation on the X-59 aircraft. He also mentioned the Quest mission, which is the bigger picture of our efforts to use the X-59 to gather data that will help change the rules about supersonic flight. As mission integration manager for Quest, it's my privilege to work with a great team and help them make sure that all the pieces that need to come together, the airplane, the probing measurements, the ground measurements, the community surveys, the interaction with the international regulatory community, all comes together in a timely manner and enables us to be successful in our goal of collecting the data that's needed to change the rules. So, but that all fits into a bigger picture of the idea of the return of supersonic flight and opening up new markets for faster air travel that's accessible to more people. So NASA Aeronautics, a key part of NASA that we've been talking about over the past couple of days, as part of our vision for the future of aviation transportation, we look for things that are transformative, and global and sustainable. So supersonic flight, the speed that that it would enable, and the time savings is obviously transformative and can help global aviation. But environmental impact and sustainability are two big barriers that need to be overcome for future supersonic flight. So NASA has a unique role in something like trying to make a transformation like this. Obviously, we develop technologies like the technology to quiet sonic boom or to make supersonic aircraft quieter around the airports. But we also play a role of creating valid, defendable scientific data that can be used to support the development of rules and standards for the certification of supersonic flight. And in doing that, we're not alone in this. We participate in a community of people, of organizations with interest in supersonics, and that's universities, other international research, other research organizations, regulators, and companies. So, and all of that whole community has a vision of bringing back supersonic flight, but not like the Concorde in a way that's limited to a small segment of the population, or has potential environmental impacts, but something that's clean and sustainable and accessible. So for our panel today, I'm real pleased to be able to bring representatives of three of those different members of the community to participate and talk about supersonic flight. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Muni Majiji. Muni is a senior technical advisor in the FAA's Office of Environment and Energy, the group that will set policy for and regulations for future supersonic flight. Lori Ozorowski from NASA is manager of the Commercial Supersonic Technology Project. So a lot of the work in preparing for the community testing and measuring the acoustic signature of the X-59 takes place in her project. But also it's in her project where we're doing some of the research to address some of those other barriers to supersonic flight, noise and emissions. Also, I hope we have him on audio. I understand he's having a little trouble with his video, but Dr. Michael Bonanno from Lockheed Martin. Mike is the air vehicle lead for the X-59, so he's intimately involved in intimately involved in the design of the airplane, and also in the current effort to complete its fabrication and test it and get it ready for flight. So welcome, panelists. It's great to have you here today. So I'm going to start out. I've given your name and organizations, but I'll give you each a chance to say a brief, talk briefly about your background and how you got interested in supersonic flight, and a little bit more about your role. So Mooney, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the introduction. I'm Muni Mujigi. I serve as a senior technical advisor, as Peter mentioned, at FAA's Division of Office of Environment and Energy. In that role, I review, assess technology progress being made in the area of noise reduction of aviation products, including supersonics, and also help guide, develop FAA policies towards regulating noise and emissions of these airplanes and air vehicles. So it's a very interesting job. I get to see the advances being made and how those advances can be put into products to reduce the aviation environmental impact. And I got interested in supersonics at a very young age. I grew up in a small town in India. When I was 10-year-old, there was an exhibition from NASA through US aid talking about the rocket programs at the time, Gemini and Apollo and Mercury. And that's the one that sparked my interest. And that has continued to this date. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mooney. Lori?
Hello, everybody. As Peter said, I'm Lori Ozorowski, and I am the project manager for the Commercial Supersonic Technology Project at NASA. I have been at NASA for over 30 years, working to advance design methods and assessing technologies for integration and application to commercial supersonic aircraft, while at the same time trying to overcome all of the technical barriers to affordable, environmentally responsible, faster air travel. And I think in the past 30 years, Peter, you and I have worked together for 3 decades now. I think we've seen a lot of amazing advancements toward supersonic commercial air travel. Unfortunately, also, watched the end of saw the end of the Concorde era. And so, I never got to fly on the Concorde, but I'm really hoping that I can, in the future, fly on some supersonic commercial aircraft. But I think, when I started my journey at NASA, one of the things, we were already working on fighting boom back then, and I probably was one of those who said this was just not something we could ever do. And so the excitement that I have over where we are today with the X-59 and seeing that, we really can, and we believe we can quiet supersonic flight. It's very exciting for me to see where we are, and I just can't wait till we get to experience that with the X-59.
Thanks, Lori. Mike, are you on audio?
Can you all hear me? I'm sorry, I'm having so many technical problems here. Can you hear me?
Okay? Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. That's great.
Okay, well, I'll keep it
your face,
brief because it seems pretty shaky in terms of very.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, Mike, you're cutting out. We keep losing you. So a bit about Mike. I know he's been at Lockheed for quite some time. He graduated from Georgia Tech. We actually had interactions with him when he was a student in some of our earlier supersonic design work. And he's really been a leader at Lockheed in terms of understanding the technology required to design an aircraft for quiet supersonic flight, and working with us as we've gone from some of the basic work to the preliminary conceptual and preliminary designs of the X-59. And now, as I say, he's playing a key role in the actual manufacturing and testing of the aircraft. So hopefully he'll be able to join us. If not, we'll try and fill in for him on some of the questions. So let's start with a big picture look. Jim touched on it a little bit, but why supersonic air travel? Why why is it? What makes it interesting? Why do we keep coming back to the the idea of a supersonic airliner? And you're both welcome to weigh in.
Sure, I can jump in and Lori can follow. I think if you look at the contribution aviation has made, civil aviation has made, it has brought the world closer over the years, particularly after World War II. It's allowed significant growth in global commerce, cultural, educational, medical opportunities to be explored by millions of people, and it has brought about significant advances in standard of living across the world. But we've been stuck at subsonic Mach numbers for civil transport, no more than 8/10 to 9/10 in that ballpark, for all these years since World War II. And the human endeavor to go faster and cut down the travel time so that you get to your destination faster, that's always will be there. And supersonics is the next logical step. Of course, it has its challenges, but that's what keeps a lot of us excited to work this problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Mooney. Lori?
Yeah, thanks. So, as Mooney kind of said, the fact is we are, all interconnected globally these days. And, having a future where we have affordable and sustainable supersonic travel, it really is a game changer. It could be a big game changer in a lot of people's lives. Those of us on the panel here, we all travel a lot for work, and we spend a lot of time in the air. And I always kind of, one of the things that motivates me, I guess, as somebody who's been pushing for commercial supersonics for a long time is, I think about a friend of mine who was one of those road warriors, and the sacrifices that she made during, while we were both raising kids. I could be home if I wasn't traveling. I could be home and send my kids out the door for school, put them in bed at night. And she's one of these folks that travels across the country for a 4-hour meeting as a construction manager. She has to show up in person. And I always kind of think back, how much of an impact supersonic travel would have had on her life as a mom. And it's one of those things that I just kind of take to work every day that kind of helps motivate me, because I know there's so many people like that. And, ultimately it's all about having more time to spend with people you love. Nobody ever says, I really want to fly slower. Well, maybe there are some people. There's those glider pilots out there that may say that. But, everybody, nobody gets very excited about it, because everybody, I think, is in agreement that it is just it could be just so good in so many people's lives.
Yeah, thanks so much. That really is great, for both of you. It's just that personal connection and being there in person and not having to spend so much of your time that you'd rather be with people en route. I think that continually brings us back to supersonic flight. So the technology for supersonic flight has been around for a long time. We had the Concorde. It was, and as Clu mentioned, the USSST in the 60s. Let's talk a little bit about what the Concorde did and why it ultimately was not successful as a commercial operation. So, Mooney, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks again. Concorde was indeed is indeed a beautiful airplane. At the time, it was designed to fly at Mach 2 with existing engines and technologies. It was an engineering marvel, no doubt about it. But when the issues with Concorde were multiple. One was it was very loud during takeoff because it used to use afterburners. um, and it did not have any low sonic boom design features. So when it flew at Mach 2, it created very high noise levels, like 2 pounds per square foot, which probably doesn't mean a whole lot for many people, but it'll be like a significant thunder clap. And the startling effect of a boom is another thing that impacted people. So the high levels of sonic boom uh, was a big concern, along with the takeoff noise. And the fuel burn was a lot higher because it was using old-fashioned turbojet engines. And so all those things made it not an economical success. And the ticket prices were extremely high. So that made it, serve a very small community. And if we want to have more people be able to travel supersonically, we need to make sure we address all those challenges: economic viability, low boom designs, low takeoff noise, and lower emissions. So that's the main problem with the Concorde, I felt, why it did not succeed. Lori, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think my thoughts on that really it really do mirror Mooney's. When I look at the Concorde, I just think it was such a technological marvel at that time. At least from an engineer's perspective. I still, we still do concept studies, and so often they start looking a lot like a Concorde. So that it was a great design. But it was probably an aircraft that was just brought to the market at the wrong time. I think we were making a lot of advancements in our, on the subsonic transport side. Aircraft, and they have, they've been getting quieter, more fuel efficient, and I don't think the supersonics technology, I think right off the bat, the Concorde came in and just couldn't compete economically. It's not unusual for somebody starting a new market that you can't participate, engage economically. But yeah, I just think that it was maybe just the wrong time try to open that market. And I think that's what we're trying to do today is solve all of those problems so that when we hit them, when that market does open up, we can be efficient and affordable and sustainable, solve the sonic boom problem, solve that LTO, the landing takeoff noise problem, and be sustainable. So again, just an amazing aircraft, just maybe just not the right time in history for it.
So part of it maybe was due to some of its operational characteristics, it just wasn't compatible with the way airlines use aircraft on a regular basis. And part of that was, of course, it couldn't fly supersonic overland, so it couldn't do those overland routes. So Mooney, you're the representative from the FAA here today. Can you talk a little bit about how the ban on supersonic flight came about, and is that a global thing, or is it just U.S.? How does the rest of the world view sonic boom noise?
Oh, that's a great question, Peter. When the Concorde was developed and was flying, U.S. They did fly into U.S. and we all heard the loud sonic boom, and there was a lot of concern expressed by the citizens in the U.S. And basically the Congress passed a law in 1973 banning supersonic civil flights over land due to the startling effect, and it could wake up people in the night, or it can cause some minor structural damage, etc. So although the overland supersonic civil flight was banned in the US, it gained slower acceptance in many other countries in the world, so much so that now almost every country has some kind of a limitation of supersonic civil flights over land. Military flights are different. They do fly under, due to defense requirements. They are allowed to fly supersonic over land. But when you want to introduce civil supersonic transport, the supersonic ban is an issue that has to be solved across the many countries, and hence it's international in scope. So this supersonic flights, civil flights, the market is international travel. So it's very important to get a buy-in from many countries that will permit supersonic flight over land. So the technology that X-59 is trying to develop to lower supersonic booms to a thumb is extremely important to overcome such restrictions from across the globe, many countries. Hope that answers the question.
Oh yeah, that's great thoughts. It is interesting, how the ban is essentially worldwide, and although it's not necessarily a ban on supersonic flight, but it's a ban on exposing people to sonic boom noise, which essentially, until X-59 came along, eliminates the possibility of flying supersonic speed. So, the X-59 is an amazing aircraft, and Clue really gave us a lot of cool images of it, and talked a lot about how it operates. But how the solving the sonic boom problem, essentially reducing the noise from sonic boom, it's something that's been studied for decades. What is it? And Lori, we're going to have to come to you on this one. What is it about the X-59's design and design of low boom aircraft in general? How does it actually reduce the noise from the sonic boom?
All right, so I'll take a crack at this one since Mike's not here. So I mean, a typical supersonic aircraft, as it flies supersonically, creates shock waves, which they tend to kind of merge as they come off the aircraft and travel to the ground, and that's when they get to the ground. There's two loud, bang bangs, which are your loud sonic booms. And so the technology that's used in the X-59, and this is, as you said, it is a result of decades of trying to understand how we could, alter that pressure wave that we hear on the ground, by kind of breaking up all of those shock waves, so that they don't come together as one very loud sound. And I think what's really enabled us is two things. One is understanding and having the design philosophy on how to do that. We've had lots of things over the years, different approaches to that. And then of course the other is just the computational tools that we have in hand. So I mean, it is a very complicated problem to solve, and I think just back early in our careers, we just didn't have the tools that could allow us to do this. So it really has a lot to do with advances in computational capabilities and really just creativeness. I mean, I wish Mike was here to give him a lot of credit, because I mean, he really is the one who is responsible for the actual design of that X-59, and it's just an amazing design to get us to what we need for the for doing our community testing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question, Peter. I'm sure you may have
I think
something to add.
It's a good start. So Jim said, long and skinny is important. So obviously the nose shape is critical to establishing that shockwave system that doesn't merge. What are some of the other features of the X-59 that are important for creating that signature with the individual shockwaves?
So there's a number of things in that design. You kind of been talking a lot about the Concorde. and it had a long nose, but it wasn't quite the length of the X-59. So yes, the nose lets it you spread out that pressure wave generated by the aircraft. You also notice the propulsion system is on the inlet. The engine is on the top of the aircraft. We do a lot of design to shield shocks coming off of the inlet. The nozzle itself at the back end of the engine is also shielded. And then we've got a lot of different lifting surfaces along the way. So we've got canards, and we've got a horizontal stabilizer, and we've got this little T-tail up at the top of the tail. And what that allows us to do, it gives us design control authority to help tailor that pressure signature. The other thing is we don't have we've got a forward vision system on the aircraft, the external vision system that allows us to avoid having a sharp intersection for the canopy. So where the pilots you typically see on a subsonic aircraft. So again, that would be be hard to design out of the aircraft. So there's a lot of features in that aircraft that eventually would probably be on a future airliner. But it's really about all those trying to reflect shock waves up rather than sending them all down to the ground, or at least weak ones down to the ground.
Yeah. I think you really make an important point there. Is although the X-59 is a unique aircraft, the features that it incorporates are things that were developed in study of larger airplanes and will be applicable to future designs as well. But the design of the X-59 is as exciting and as intensive an effort it's really only part of the Quest mission. So as Jim mentioned, there's 3 phases, but really the ultimate challenge of the mission is to use the X-59 in community testing. So what's the plan there, and what are we looking to gather in the way of information that will help us understand if the sound is quiet enough? Lori, you want to go ahead, Mooney?
Oh,
Mooney,
yeah.
why don't you let me start off on this one, and you can cover the back end of it.
Sure.
So as you said, the Quest mission has 3 phases. Once we've proven that the aircraft is safe to fly, we're going to spend a lot of time making sure that it creates that sound that we have designed it for. With the ultimate goal is we're going to take that aircraft out and actually do some testing in various communities around the country. And those tests will involve recruiting survey participants on the ground. The idea is that we need to collect knowledge about human response to these sonic thumps. And so we're going to go out. We're going to test right now, 5 communities around the country. We need to make sure we have a very representative cross section of the population, climate, urbanicity. There's so many factors that go into making a representative, having a representative database that we're trying to gather. So we will be surveying people on the ground, asking them questions about what were you doing when you heard that noise? Did you hear a noise? What were you doing when you heard that noise? And how annoyed were you? Were you not annoyed at all or highly annoyed? And we'll take all of that data along with measurements that we will be taking as part of the test. We have to collate all of that and correlate it all. And at some point, we will then have a database of annoyance to a loudness level, which is what we're going to hand off to Mooney and the international regulators. And then they're going to do their job. So I don't know if you want to take that from there, Mooney.
Yeah, how does that work? Yeah.
I think you explained the fun part. Just to the fun part is NASA builds this X-planes, and they have huge history behind those, and each of those X-planes has contributed so much for the aeronautical development, and X-59 is going to be one of those. And the objective there is, like Lori and Peter said, is how do we design that to minimize the sonic boom? It's that intelligent way of doing the design that will come out of that activity. And NASA is taking it to the next step of also trying to see how it is perceived by the public. And in that sense, they are going to do a lot of community testing and by recruiting volunteers and assessing how does this feel compared, how does this reduced sonic boom, or what we call as a sonic thump, which is the design calculations indicate it will be like slamming a car door and you hear it about 20 feet away from the car door closing. That's the expectation, that's how loud it will be. Well, compared to Concorde, which was a lot higher. Just to give an example, Concorde sonic boom is about more than 30 dBs, louder than what X59 is going to be. You may say, what is 30 dBs? I mean, people who live in logarithmic scale, they understand, but not everybody. So the 10 dB is like an order of magnitude lower in energy, sound energy. So 30 dB is like one of 1,000 of the energy. So that is a significant reduction in that sound level that we think should be reasonably acceptable for majority of the people. But we need to demonstrate that, because there is a concern from the past experience with the Concorde that these supersonic airplanes make a lot of noise. So we had to prove beyond doubt to international communities, not just regulators and airlines and the general public, etc., that we're not going to introduce an airplane that will make significant sonic boom and that can upset their life and the quality of life and so on. So that's the challenge. And so the examples that Laurie said of going and sampling the people in different communities, a wide range of communities, to see how does this sound compared to what you normally hear in your day-to-day lives. Is it a big protrusion of or is it a big interference, or it's not? I think that kind of a data is extremely valuable for the US government to take it to international civil aviation organization, which where the international standards are being set, and FAA basically represents the US in those committees. And we take this such information and make a case that the sonic boom of the supersonic airplanes can be reduced. Here is some evidence to show that, and based on that, we can make some internationally accepted regulations that these kind of levels are okay and they will be acceptable. That's the process. And international civil aviation regulations are all consensus driven, meaning everybody has to buy into that. Nobody's boss. So it has to be through data reasoning. We have to convince the rest of the nations that this is the right thing to do. So that's where the US FAA comes into play with extremely valuable support from NASA and what they're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Mooney.
Peter.
So you made a couple of really
Peter.
great points. Yes.
Oh, I was just going to add, I think, one thing that I think kind of gets, that's important for people to understand is that there is right now, there's just a ban, right? There is no acceptable level. And you and I, we don't know what the acceptable level, what we think that acceptable level might be. We have ideas, but until, a decision is made based on, our data we're providing and, any other data available, a company can't really go invest in design to a level that they don't know. I mean, we have this issue across a lot of, different areas in supersonic. So, we've designed an airplane that has a range of, it's a pretty broad range of loudness levels that it can generate, or we think it will be able to generate. I just think that's kind of important, that we're going to be able to go from a complete ban, we hope, to some level. We don't know what that level may be, though. And that's what, what we have to gather data to find out.
That's so all, yeah, the two of you makes really, really great points. It's, NASA's done research to make us believe that we're in the ballpark with the sound level from the X-59, but it is going to be up to the information that we gather from the public to determine really how people respond, and then ultimately it's up to the international community to decide what level would be acceptable. And as Mooney said, we're not going to do something that a majority of the people or a significant number of people are disturbed by. And so that also kind of points to, as Lori was saying, it always kind of points to the need for, NASA's leading this effort, but we work with the FAA, we work with the ICAO, and we work with the international community to make it happen. So I just want to take a chance to take a brief detour to because a couple of questions have come up in the chat about other aspects of the exposure to sonic boom. So we're focused on, is it going to be acceptable to people? But people have mentioned safety for flying other airplanes flying in the vicinity. There's concern about animals. What research has been done in the past to get us to the point where we feel that if we can solve the acceptability problem, we'll be we'll be on the right track to having acceptable supersonic flight over people, over land? Lori?
So so I think over the last 50 plus years, there've been a lot of studies that have looked at the impact of sonic booms and sonic thumps on on animals, interference in migration patterns, that sort of thing. And I think everything that I've seen in the literature says that it's not expected to have, it doesn't show to have any real impact on those sort of things. So we think that if we can solve the human annoyance problem, I think we're going to be in good shape with our reduced boom aircraft. I don't know if anybody else wants to take a stab at that.
So yeah, I think it's important to remind people.
I tend to agree with you, Lori.
It's important to remind people that when we were developing the Concorde and the USSST, there was a lot of research that was done on exposure to actual sonic boom noise, and even at those loud levels, it really kind of did come down to, it was human annoyance that was kind of the main factor that remained when you viewed sonic boom from the perspective of airline operations. We talked about the X-59 and its design features, and it's not a prototype. So we'll get back to its emissions and its fuel burn in a few minutes, but just want to briefly talk about, and I see Mike is online, so maybe he'll get a chance to weigh in. Is the X-59 representative of the sounds that a future supersonic airliner will generate?
And can I just get an audio check? Can you all hear me? And very much apologize for the challenges we've had with that.
You're a little
bit
Mike. You're readable.
Okay. All right. Well, absolutely. We had a list of requirements we had to meet when we were designing the shape of X-59 to become a flying signal generator. And the number one requirement, literally, was to make sure that its signature is traceable to a family of potential future full-scale supersonic transports that would be designed to address the en route acoustic noise. And so we had to actually size up the airplane. It had to be a certain length, and X-59 is roughly 100 feet long, just below that, in order to make sure that the signature had traceability to those future products. But based on the research we've done, and the research, really a lot of the research that NASA and other acoustic engineers have done, they show that when we have a 75 perceived level signature that comes from X-59, it would be perceived in almost exactly the same way as a larger airplane making that same PLDB signature. So that has been first and foremost in terms of our design criteria through the evolution of X-59.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So yeah, so that's important. I mean, the X-59 it had a very small set of requirements, but a very important set of requirements, essentially to enable it to fulfill its mission to collect data on the response to quiet supersonic thump sounds. But it's not necessarily, like I say, it's not a prototype. So what can you say about its fuel burn and its takeoff and landing noise characteristics?
Oh, well, I mean, those are more similar to what you would see on a tactical aircraft, like it's used by the U.S. military, rather than a future supersonic airliner. The mission for X-59 is, like you said, Peter, very different than what the mission would be for an airliner. In this case, we're really focused on solving that one really hard problem of the en route noise signature. But for those other aspects, we've chosen to reduce risk. So we use an off-the-shelf propulsion system from an F-18 Super Hornet. It's a GE F414 engine. And the amount of noise, for example, that comes from that and the fuel burn are just not consistent. And so those are different challenges that need to be addressed. But X-59 is I believe, rightfully focused on that one problem, and the other NASA research that's addressing those other challenges would also feed into a future product.
Yeah, excellent. But that does kind of open the door to talking about some of the other challenges that need to be addressed before supersonic aircraft can become a reality. So let's just talk a little bit about some of those other challenges and maybe some of the work that's going on to address those. And we'll start with Lori.
Yeah, so I guess we do get asked a lot about the other challenges. There is the NASA research portfolio currently has research going on to address all of those other sustainability areas. So reducing fuel burn, more efficient aircraft, reducing landing and takeoff noise, and reducing high altitude emissions. So we've got a number of efforts underway in all of those areas. They are all very challenging, but we are working with the propulsion companies, the airframe companies, and the regulatory community to try to understand what those how good we need to be, and understand the modeling that's involved in know how good we are and how good we need to be. I think there's another panel a little bit later today that's really going to be focused on the sustainable aviation fuels. I think they'll cover that a lot more at that point. But yeah, there's just definitely a lot of unique challenges, and NASA, we are working all of them, and it's a lot of our focus obviously is on the Quest mission, but we are doing additional fundamental research in all of, so we can overcome all of those barriers.
Great. So Mooney, so things like landing and takeoff noise and emissions from supersonic aircraft are also subject to FAA and international regulations, are they not? What's the status there?
Yeah, certainly. Like we've been talking, there are four major challenges. One is the sonic boom. How do we make sure we reduce sonic boom? X-59 is addressing that. And then landing and takeoff noise. That means that's where the engine is the biggest noise contributor. And that's where several propulsion companies and airframe companies designing the supersonic airplanes pay a lot of attention to the engine design, the cycle selection, and the airplane flying characteristics to make sure you make as less noise as possible and meet the current noise standards that are out there, so it doesn't stick up like like significantly noticeable. As far as the fuel burn is concerned, that directly impacts the economics as well as the carbon emissions that are of concern now. So over there, I'm sure in the next panel we'll be talking about that. The sustainable alternate fuels is one which will reduce the overall life cycle emissions. That's being worked very heavily for both subsonics and supersonics. Um, and the improved designs compared to the previous generation supersonic designs are making them more efficient, so they burn less fuel than the previous supersonic airplanes. So I think there are multiple problems you have to attack them by different approaches each time, and it's the airplane company which builds all of them together as a system integrator to develop such a product, and FAA is responsible for developing those regulations for not just the sonic boom, but also the landing takeoff noise and the carbon emissions, etc. So we consider all these technology developments in make sure we promote the right ones to develop sensible environmental regulations. They have to be environmentally beneficial, but also technically feasible and economically viable. So all those considerations go into developing reasonable environmental regulations for supersonics.
So as Lori mentioned, it's up to all of us kind of to work together so that industry can have a have a essentially a regulatory market that they understand and can evaluate whether or not a product could be brought forward. So Mike, can you give us like an aviation manufacturer's perspective on the challenges and the research needed to bring a supersonic aircraft to market eventually?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Mooney hit the nail on the head. I'd say that one of the biggest barriers and thankfully NASA is working to overcome it, both via X-59 and the other activities, is the regulatory uncertainty. Right now, there's actually quite a bit of work going on, both within the United States and with our international agencies like ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, to define what are the regulations, both for takeoff noise and carbon emissions and other aspects, high altitude emissions. Right now, the regulatory environment for those factors is still fairly dynamic, and so it's challenging to really nail down what your design ought to be for a future product that would require large investment until there's more certainty. And so that's why the work that's being done right now is so important, because it is helping create that bedrock foundation so that we can clarify that regulatory environment. What are the criteria that that airplane should be certified to? For example, on X-59, we have right now, it's just, even if we could make a 75 PLDB large-scale airliner, that still would not be allowed to fly supersonic over land in the United States, even though many of us in the research community around sonic boom believes that that level of noise is likely to be acceptable. We'll see, obviously, based on the results of X59, but right now the law just doesn't permit it at all. So really, to summarize, that's the biggest obstacle, in my opinion, is just clarifying what are the rules and what do we need to design to.
Thanks. So we're kind of running out of time. I want to hit on two questions if I can. There's kind of a thread that's gone through the chat on like special handling for supersonic aircraft, and will they be needed to operate in certain ways to avoid exposing people to sounds on the ground. Quickly, some comments on the philosophy behind the design and special handling for supersonic aircraft. Mike, maybe?
Yeah, I can answer that question, and it's a very good one. There will need to be some additional considerations for handling en route in order to avoid unacceptable sonic boom exposure. For example, when the airplane maneuvers, so if it turns left or right, if it was to do so in a kind of a steep way, so a stronger than normal lateral turn while it's flying en route, that could cause what's called a focus boom and lead to a unacceptable sound on the ground, even if it's been designed for boom mitigation. So there will need to be really the way that we're planning on doing that is via software, both cues for the pilot and very intentional displays so that the pilot is very aware of what is permissible without violating those restrictions that would cause the noise to become unacceptable. Additionally, they'll just navigate so that they can avoid, if there is a particularly sensitive area for whatever reason, I think that'll get baked into the flight planning.
All right, very good. So we're just about out of time. I was hoping to give you all time for closing remarks, but I wanted to say one thing. I want to see if we talk about one thing, that what's NASA's vision for how this technology gets shared, and are we talking about a future where we have another Concorde, or something that's more accessible and more broadly usable by the public? Lori?
So we have been very focused on international collaboration in our quest, and rightly so, because it's an international community decision. As part of the mission, we have done wind tunnel testing of our configurations. We will be gathering a lot of validation data for our codes, our tools that are used for this, and all of that information we plan to share as much as we possibly can with the broader community, so that they have to have faith in what we're doing, right? We have to have so we do have to share that with the community. And the other part, I did see there was a question that came in about the international aspects of our testing, and we have been trying to find an international partner so that we could actually go internationally and do a similar test in another country that helps build confidence in our processes. So we are still working on that, but we see this as an international problem, and we hope to be able to share as much information and what we learned from this with that community.
Okay, thanks. And unfortunately, we're going to have to cut it off there. Thank you all very much for your insights and information. Mike, we're so glad we could at least get you online for an audio perspective. Thanks everybody to the great questions. We didn't have a chance to address a lot of them directly, but I think we covered them a lot in our discussions. Thanks to imaginAviation for this opportunity to talk about supersonics. So there's a break coming up but before we go to that break, there's another NASA in action video. We've been talking about flight at a Mach 1.4 or a little bit faster, but there's a lot of speed regime left to cover. So this little segment addresses some technology that our aeronautics test capabilities effort is developing to test vehicles at Mach numbers as high as 6. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.